I'd now like you all to meet and greet someone that most of you already know. Together with her husband, Michael, who's on my left, Jean Lewis is raising two sons, one of whom is autistic. She was, or I guess I should say she is, because she's standing here, the founding director of FEATBC, a leading member of the steering committee for each of the Autism and the Hugo lawsuits, and for over 10 years has been a persistent and effective voice for the cause of Medicare for Autism Now. I'm sure many of you have heard Jean on the Bill Good Show many times over the past 10 years. Having recently been Jean's sidekick at the CKNW 98 studio, I can say there's a genuine appreciation and, more importantly, support from the host of that program for autism and for Medicare for Autism Now. Jean has been able to portray this issue clearly, memorably, and concisely on a consistent basis. Besides that, she's much better looking than me. Canada's healthcare minister, Tony Clement, might have had Jean Lewis in mind last year when he labeled FEATBC members, and you may have heard this before, but I'd like you to look at everybody in this room. He labeled FEATBC members, quote, as radical extremists, end quote. Could it be that Mr. Clement's trepidation and fear upon hearing, Mr. Clement, the Prime Minister is on the line? Could he be loathing the words, Minister, Mrs. Lewis is on the line? Ladies and gentlemen and fellow radical extremists, Jean Lewis.
Well, radical extremists, thank you very much. I meant to wear my pearls today. They kind of, you know, what radical extremists wear. Whoops. Oops, can everyone hear me? Can you hear me at the back? I promised to make my remarks brief. It's been a long afternoon, but it's been a wonderful afternoon. I'd just like to start by thanking all of you for attending today. I'm always just so overwhelmed by the parents of autistic children, and I feel so privileged to be part of it. I'd like to also take this moment to acknowledge my husband, Michael Lewis, and James, who are here today. Michael, as many of you may know, is the president of the Autism Society of British Columbia and has worked as hard, if not harder, than anyone on this issue. So, lots of parents and lots of speakers today, and there's a common theme that runs throughout it, obviously Medicare for Autism Now. But I guess there's an underlying theme, and that's the one of betrayal. We heard it over and over and over again, and our family's story is not unlike everyone else in this room. The details are slightly different, but you know, the story is basically the same movie. So what do we know and what have we learned? Well, despite a decade, or over a decade, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I can't believe I'm still doing this after 12 years. The issue was the same 12 years ago as it is today. But despite a decade of lobbying, collaborating, and litigating, our kids are still excluded from our universal health care system. So, I'd like to summarize and share what our movement has learned in the past decade. My mother used to say to us, there's something about the truth, it just doesn't go away. Well, here's some truths that I think we all need to own. And parents, this is the most important one. Autism is a health care issue, period. The World Health Organization has identified it as so, and in autumn, Madam Justice Allen said, autism requires treatment just like any other core health need. Parents, we really need to understand this, that our children's treatment will never be guaranteed or protected until it is enshrined or protected in the Canada Health Act. Current limited funding provided through the provincial government's Social Services Ministry will evaporate and could evaporate tomorrow with the stroke of a bureaucrat's pen. There is no legislation that exists within those ministries that will protect our children's ongoing treatment rights. Now, I've heard this debate lots of times in 10 years by parents and others who say, well, It's not just about healthcare. Kids need education, they need jobs, they need housing, they need this and that. And that's all true. Our children, as they grow up, need lots of things. But until we address the fundamental need, which is treatment, the rest of it, frankly, is insignificant. Believe it when I say that autism is as legitimate a disease as cancer or diabetes and as worthy of treatment. Now, contrary to what they tell us, the federal government actually is responsible for stepping up here. We have an epidemic of staggering proportions in North America. 1 in 150 children and 1 in 94 boys are now being diagnosed with autism. We've heard 2 people say that already, at least today. The Canada Health Act, which is administered by the federal government, is not divinely inspired scripture. It is fallible legislation which certainly can be amended, contrary to what many MPs have told us. But part of the problem is it's become acceptable practice and parliamentary behavior for MPs to lie to parents of children with autism. So, I know it's been a long afternoon, but this is a test. See who's listening. How do we respond when a candidate tells you that it is impossible to amend the Canada Health Act? I'm taking a page out of Barack Obama's book here, okay? What do you say, Roxanne Black? Yes, we can. Say it with me. Yes, we can. What again? Yes, we can. Not too bad. That's right. Yes, we can. Okay, so what have we learned? That this issue will ultimately be solved at the ballot box. And we've learned that through some very painful experience. You know, collaborating, petitioning, government, we've learned it doesn't work. As a matter of fact, it usually ends up serving the government and further victimizing our children. We've learned that litigation has been useful, but in a limited way. It's gotten the attention, but it has not solved the problem. We've also come to know that this is not a partisan issue. All the political parties have promised us the moon while they're in opposition, and all have betrayed us when they form government, both provincially and federally. What a stunning indictment on our political system. This is not a left or right issue, it is a right and wrong issue. Now, after the Supreme Court of Canada decision, Sabrina mentioned in her remarks that she suggested that I seek the Conservative nomination in my constituency, which is West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky. Isn't that a name? Now, those of you who know Sabrina, like when she suggests you do something, you say yeah, okay? So she phoned me up one day and said, you know, Jean, this is the answer, here it is. John Reynolds is retiring and you need to seek that nomination and you'll get elected and, you know, we'll have someone on the inside. And so I said, oh, okay. Now I have no, and I mean no, political experience, none. But anyway, I thought, well, I'll give it a whirl. And I did, and I experienced firsthand the dysfunction of party politics in Canada and really came to understand why not much happens. When I was involved in the nomination contest, it was suggested to me that I phone up some of the long-time members of the Conservative Party. Now, you have to understand that I'm not particularly partisan, but I did, and I had questions asked of me like this: well, does your husband approve of you running for this nomination? And if he does, well, what's wrong with him? Why isn't he running? And I think some of the most useful advice I got from a long-term political in that constituency was, she told me that I should invest in the best brassiere that I could possibly afford, because it would be very important when the camera was on that I looked my best. And another useful piece of advice was to make sure that if I was elected and went to Ottawa, that I never wore the same ball gown twice, because the parliamentary press gallery would pick up on that and it would be front page news. Now, those are true stories, and this is what party politics have descended to in Canada. Ball gowns and foundation garments have taken precedence over real public policy issues. And I guess just to close the loop, the candidate that did win that nomination, he bussed in his church to the nomination meeting. You know, and up until that time, I thought that that only happened in Arkansas. But it doesn't. It happened in Surrey, and it happened in West Vancouver.